I apologized. I meant it. But even as she spoke, something did not sit right. Her answers were careful, measured, like she was reading from a script she had practiced many times. And when Ethan came into the room, the conversation stopped instantly. Later that evening, Sophie climbed onto my lap and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Daddy told Grandma not to tell you everything," she said. That was when I realized I had not crossed the line by asking questions. I had crossed the line by believing the first version of the truth. And whatever was coming next was going to be worse. The kitchen felt smaller than usual that night, like the walls were listening. Marjorie sat at the table with the leather bag in front of her, unopened this time. Ethan stood near the doorway, arms crossed, his face tight and unreadable. I stayed where I was, my hands resting on the counter, trying to steady myself. I had already apologized once. I was not going to apologize again until I knew the whole truth. Marjorie took a deep breath and finally opened the bag all the way. She slid the contents onto the table slowly, as if giving each item its own weight. There were stacks of cash, neatly wrapped. There were envelopes with dates written on them. There were medical bills, old and new. And there were letters. Not printed, handwritten. "This is Claire," Marjorie said quietly. "The woman you saw." She told me the accident happened 9 years ago, before Ethan and I were married. Ethan had been driving late at night after an argument with his father. He was angry, distracted, and not thinking clearly. Another car swerved. There was a crash. Claire was injured badly enough that her life never fully returned to what it had been. Ethan spoke then, his voice low. "I thought it was handled." That sentence landed like a slap. Marjorie explained that Robert had taken control immediately. Lawyers, payments, agreements, everything sealed and buried, before Ethan even understood what it meant to live with what he had done. When Robert died, those payments stopped. Claire reached out again, not for revenge, for help. Marjorie picked up one of the envelopes. "I couldn't let it come back to him," she said. "I couldn't let it destroy your family." I felt my anger soften into something heavier. Guilt, shame, understanding. I had accused her of cruelty when she had been sacrificing everything quietly. For a moment, I thought that was the full truth. Then Sophie's words echoed in my head. "Daddy told Grandma not to tell you everything." I asked Ethan to look at me. Really look at me. "Is that all?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any confession could. I reached for the burner phone on the table and turned it on. There were recent messages. Very recent. My hands shook as I scrolled. They were not apologies. They were warnings. Ethan had been meeting Claire in secret, not to make things right, to make sure she stayed quiet, to remind her what would happen if the truth came out. The room went silent. Marjorie covered her mouth and began to cry again. But this time it was different. This was not fear. This was grief. "I begged you to stop," she said to Ethan. "I begged you to let me handle it." Ethan's face finally cracked. He admitted what he had never said out loud. The accident had not been a simple mistake. He had been angry. He had chased the other car. He had lost control. I felt something inside me hardened. All this time, Marjorie had not been protecting Ethan from the truth. She'd been protecting all of us from the kind of man he could be when no one was watching. I told him to leave the house. He tried to argue. He tried to explain. But for the first time I did not soften my voice. I did not try to understand him. Before protecting myself and my child, when the door closed behind him, the house felt quieter than it had in years. Marjorie looked at me like she expected anger. Instead, I felt something closer to sorrow. "We both did the wrong thing," I said, "but we are not the same." She nodded, tears falling freely now. That night, I locked the bag away, not to hide it, but to mark the end of silence. Some truths destroy families. Others save them. And that was the moment everything finally changed. The morning after Ethan left, the house felt unfamiliar. Not empty, but quieter in a way that made every sound stand out. The hum of the refrigerator, The clock. On the wall. Sophie's footsteps as she walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Life was still moving, but something heavy had finally been lifted, even if the cost of lifting it hurt more than I expected. Sophie climbed into a chair and looked around like she was searching for something. "Is Daddy at work?" she asked. I told her the truth, but gently. I said Daddy needed some time away to fix a big mistake. She nodded in that way children do when they sense honesty, even if they do not fully understand it. She reached for Marjorie's hand across the table, and Marjorie flinched like she did not deserve the touch. That moment broke something open between us. Marjorie and I talked more in the days that followed than we had in the last 2 years combined. Not just about Ethan or the accident, but about her life. About the pressure she lived under. About the years she spent protecting men who made choices she had to pay for. She admitted she had been wrong too. She should have spoken sooner. She should have trusted me instead of carrying the weight alone. I told her I was wrong as well. I had judged her without listening. I had followed her. I had accused her. I had let fear turn into blame. Saying it out loud hurt, but it also cleared the space between us. Ethan called once. Then again. I let the calls go unanswered until I was ready. When we finally spoke, there were no excuses left, no soft words, no hiding behind the past. I told him he needed help and accountability before he could even think about being a husband or a father again. For the first time, he did not argue. The legal truth came next. Claire's situation could no longer be handled in secret. Marjorie and I contacted a lawyer together. Not to bury anything, but to face it the right way. It was terrifying, but also grounding. Secrets had controlled our lives for too long. I was done living inside someone else's silence. What surprised me most was Sophie. Children see more than we think. She stopped asking why Grandma cried at night. She slept better. She laughed more. One evening, she hugged me and said, "The house feels nicer now." That was when I knew I had made the right choice. Marjorie stayed with us. But the balance changed. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer shrinking herself. She cooked less and talked more. She asked for help. She allowed herself to be human, not just responsible. As for me, I learned something that took years of marriage and one terrible night to understand. Being quiet does not mean being kind. Protecting peace at all costs can become its own kind of damage. And sometimes the person who looks like the problem is actually the one holding everything together. I also learned that I was not the hero of this story. I made mistakes. I jumped to conclusions. I hurt someone who was already hurting. But being wrong did not mean staying wrong. It meant choosing to do better once the truth was in front of me. That night at 2 a.m. changed everything, not because of what was hidden in a bag, but because of what was hidden in people. Fear, shame, loyalty, and the courage it takes to finally stop carrying someone else's burden. If there is one thing I hope you take from my story, it is this. The truth does not always arrive gently, but it arrives for a reason. And when it does, you either face it, or it controls you forever. If this story moved you or made you think, please subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps these stories reach more people who may need to hear them. At 2 a.m., I heard my mother-in-law crying in the kitchen. Not quiet crying. Not polite crying. She was breaking. I froze in the hallway because she never cried. Not once in the 8 years I had known her. When I stepped closer, I saw her clutching a warm bag like it was the only thing holding her together. Her hands were shaking. Her face looked terrified. And in that moment, I did not feel sorry for her. I felt afraid. Because whatever she was hiding in that bag proved one thing very clearly. Someone in this house had been lying for a long time. And my first thought was not about her. It was about my husband. My name is Lena Carter. I am 32 years old, married and a mother to a 6-year-old girl named Sophie. We live in a quiet suburban home that used to feel safe. Used to feel normal. 2 years ago, my father-in-law passed away suddenly. After the funeral, my mother-in-law, Marjorie Carter, moved in with us. At first, it was meant to be temporary. Just until she felt steady again. But temporary slowly turned into permanent. Marjorie was not unkind. She was not rude. She cooked, cleaned, and stayed out of the way. Too much out of the way. She spoke softly, never shared opinions, and never asked for help. I tried to bond with her. I really did. I invited her to sit with me, to talk, to be part of our life. She always smiled and said she was fine. My husband Ethan told me to stop worrying. That's just how she is, he said. She doesn't like attention. But little. Things started to feel wrong. She stayed awake late at night. She washed dishes that were already clean. She counted cash at the kitchen table when she thought no one was watching. Once, my daughter Sophie asked me a question that made my stomach drop. "Mommy," she said, "why does Grandma cry when she thinks we are asleep?" I told myself it was grief. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself everything had an explanation. I was wrong. Because the night I heard her crying at 2 a.m., I realized this was not sadness. This was fear. And fear always has a reason. Before the story goes further, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. Because what I discovered next changed my marriage forever. I stood there for a moment after hearing her cry, telling myself to go back to bed. I did not want to cross a line. Marjorie had lived with us for 2 years, and even though we shared a roof, she still felt like a guest whose privacy I was not allowed to touch. But something felt wrong in a way I could not explain. This was not quiet grief. This was panic. The kind that comes from being cornered by the truth. I took one step into the kitchen, then another. The light above the stove was on, harsh and yellow. Marjorie was sitting at the table, hunched forward, her shoulders shaking. She had a small leather bag in front of her, open just enough for me to see inside. When she noticed me, she jumped. Her hands moved fast, pulling the bag toward her chest like a shield. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if I had caught her doing something shameful. "I did not mean to wake you," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were still shaking. I asked if she was okay. It was the safest thing I could say. She nodded too fast. "I'm fine, just couldn't sleep." That was when I saw it. Inside the bag, just for a second, I saw a thick stack of cash. Not a few bills, a lot. More than I had ever seen her carry. Tucked beside it was a phone, not her usual phone. This one was small, dark, and old. A burner phone. My heart started to race. My mind jumped to places I did not want to go. I asked her what the bag was for. She closed it fully this time and stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You should go back to bed, Lena." She had never said my name like that before. Sharp, almost cold. Before I could respond, Ethan's voice came from the hallway. "What's going on?" He stood there half asleep, rubbing his eyes. Marjorie turned to him immediately. "Nothing," she said. "I woke Lena by accident." Ethan looked at me, then at the bag, then back at his mother. Something passed between them. A look. Quick. Silent. It made my chest tighten. I said nothing. I let it go. Or at least I tried to. The next morning I could not stop thinking about that bag. About the cash. About the phone. About the way Ethan had looked at his mother. Like he already knew what I had seen. I started noticing things I had ignored before. Marjorie leaving the house at odd hours. Ethan checking his phone and turning the screen away from me. Conversations stopping when I entered the room. One afternoon, while Marjorie was out, I found the bag in her closet. I told myself I was just looking to put laundry away. That was a lie. I opened it. Inside were the same things I had seen that night. Cash, the phone, and something else. A folded photograph. It was Ethan. He was younger in the photo, standing next to a woman I had never seen before. His arm was around her, not in a friendly way. In an intimate way. My stomach dropped. I felt foolish, angry, embarrassed that I had not seen it sooner. Everything clicked too easily, and that scared me. I confronted Ethan that evening. I asked him who she was. He went quiet, not defensive, not confused. Just quiet. "I know her," he said finally. That answer hurt more than denial would have. I asked him why his mother had her photo. Why she was hiding money. Why she had a secret phone. Ethan's jaw tightened. You went through her things? I found the truth, I said. That's what I found. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and his voice changed. My mother told you not to touch that bag. That was when I realized something was very wrong. He was not angry about the photo. He was angry that I had seen it. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house felt loud. Every shadow felt heavy. And then Sophie said something the next morning that froze me in place. Daddy told Grandma not to tell you. She said casually while eating cereal. Not to tell me what? I asked. She shrugged. I don't know. But Grandma cried after. I smiled at my daughter and kissed her forehead like nothing was wrong. Inside, my chest felt like it was collapsing. Because whatever was happening did not start with Marjorie. It started with Ethan. And I had only seen the surface of it. After Sophie's words, I stopped pretending this was just stress or grief. Children do not lie by accident, and they do not invent fear they have never seen. What she said kept repeating in my head, over and over, until it felt impossible to ignore. I decided I needed answers, even if I did not like what I found. I started watching more closely. I paid attention to the times Marjorie left the house and the excuses she gave. Grocery store, short walk, church errands. None of it lined up. She always came back tense, like she had just held her breath for too long. One afternoon she left, with the leather bag tucked under her arm. Something in me snapped. I grabbed my keys and followed her, telling myself I would turn back if it felt wrong. I did not turn back. She drove across town, past familiar streets, and into an area I had never been before. She parked near a small cafe and sat in her car for several minutes before getting out. She looked around like she was afraid of being seen. I stayed far enough away that she would not notice me. That was when I saw the woman. She was about Marjorie's age, maybe a little younger. Her posture was stiff, like her body carried old pain. When Marjorie handed her the bag, the woman did not smile or say thank you. She took it with both hands, like it weighed more than money. I pulled out my phone and recorded a short clip. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to protect myself. At the time, it felt necessary. When Marjorie returned home later that day, I was waiting for her in the living room. I did not ease into the conversation. I did not ask gentle questions. I was already hurt, already convinced I knew the truth. I told her I followed her. Her face went white. I accused her of hiding things from me, of protecting Ethan, of tearing my marriage apart. I told her I had seen the woman, the money, the secrets. She stood there shaking, unable to speak at first. Then something in her broke. You have no idea what you're talking about, she said. I raised my voice. I demanded answers. I told her she had crossed a line. That was when she looked at me and said something I was not prepared to hear. You don't even know what you're protecting. Her voice was not angry. It was tired. Defeated. Ethan came home in the middle of it. He took one look at his mother's face and then turned on me. He did not ask what happened. He did not ask why I was upset. What did you do? He asked. I told him everything. The bag. The woman. The recording. His reaction was not denial. It was panic. He told me to stop. To delete the video. To leave his mother alone. He said I was making things worse. That I was digging into things that did not concern me. For the first time in our marriage, he chose her side without hesitation. I felt foolish. I felt cruel. I felt like I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. That night, I lay awake wondering if I had been wrong all along. Maybe I had misread everything. Maybe I had turned grief into guilt and secrets into sins. The next morning, Marjorie asked to talk. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She told me the woman's name was Claire. She told me she had been hurt years ago. She told me Ethan was involved, not the way I thought. Not an affair. An accident. She said Ethan had been young, careless, that he believed it had been handled. that she had been helping quietly ever since. I felt sick. Ashamed of myself for assuming the worst, for spying, for accusing her.